Hey, good day, everybody. My name is John Loveless, and I'm the Director of Sales for Extreme Federal. Welcome to Extreme Connect, and this is going to be the Federal breakout session for Extreme Connect, and I really appreciate you taking your time out and joining us. I have three esteemed, one esteemed colleague and two esteemed guests today that are going to join us on the panel. This is a little bit of a Q&A session around the federal network modernization that is occurring today in 2021. I'd like to really quick introduce our guest. I have David Blake, who's with Tyto Athene. He is the CTO at Tyto, who is a value-added reseller, federal systems integrator in the federal space. I also have Chris Theon, who is the director of secure delivery for ManTech, who is also a federal systems integrator. And then I have my colleague, Greg Castellucci, who's the director of sales engineering on the federal team. So, David, Chris, how is everybody doing today?
Doing great, John.
Doing well. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to give you guys really quick chance to introduce yourself, but one quick fact on this. Obviously looking at everybody's background, we have 120 years of federal government networking business in some capacity. I know I'm at 30 years. David, I was looking at your bio, you're 30 years. Chris, you're very close, if not there. And Greg, you might be the baby. I think you only have 27 years. So, hey, my point is there is a ton of experience on this panel, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion and the Q&A. So David, why don't I turn it over to you, and you can quickly introduce yourself and let us know what you're doing these days. Thank you.
Sure, be glad to. So thank you, John, and to Extreme Connect for this opportunity. As John said, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Tyto Athene, which means I'm responsible for the strategy, execution, and oversight of Tyto Athene's technology solutions organization in support of our clients' needs. For those that don't know Tyto Athene, we are an IT services and solutions company that provides mission-focused digital transformation to enhance our clients' experience and enable them to achieve their desired outcomes. We support both federal, civilian, and DoD clients, as well as some state and local markets. And the company first went to market in 2018 as Tyto, when it was spun off from Black Box Federal, but it has roots in history going back many years, serving the telecom IT service provider market. Most recently, Tyto acquired AT&T's Government Solutions professional services business, which is where I came from after 29 years with AT&T. That closed on April 1st, and very excited to kind of begin a second career here at Tyto Athene. My background is about half of my career on the commercial side of AT&T, working Bell Labs, AT&T Labs, doing ops planning, software architecture, automation, and network transformation kind of initiatives. And then for the past 15 years, I've served numerous civilian and DoD clients, including the IRS, Army, and DISA. So glad to be here and look forward to the discussion.
That is great. Yeah, I think David's the jack of all trades. Chris, give us a little background.
Sure. Thank you, John. I got a comment on your introduction. I think you gave me a couple of promotions in the process, but no, it's great to be here. I'm an enterprise delivery services director, so responsible for the end-to-end technical resources on our group of the DHS Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, which is a huge effort in the cybersecurity world. I work with, over the course of the last few years, worked with 12 different agencies, including DHS, that funds our work. And before that, had spent quite a bit of time in both physical and cybersecurity, doing groundbreaking projects with the Department of Veterans Affairs, the U.S. Navy, and then also commercial organizations, and even had the opportunity to do physical security work, some cutting edge work in of a particular a sporting event that happens to occur typically in the first week of February at an NFL stadium to be announced a few years ago. So happy to be part of the team. I'm going to certainly be bringing perhaps a little bit of cybersecurity focus to the conversation, but I'm a man of many parts, like most of us have, and have just a number of observations from dealing with primarily federal civilian agencies as of late.
Great to have you on, Chris. Thank you so much. And Mr. Castellucci, give a quick introduction.
Hey everyone, I'm Greg Castellucci. Like John said, Director of Systems Engineering for Extreme's Federal Organization. Got a career going back, similar to some others on the call. Some time in commercial, a lot of time in federal, going back to the Pentagon renovation program. Some time in the intel agencies as well. So spent a lot of time on a lot of sides, right? I've been in the field as a government employee as well for the Army. So I got a good perspective on things that are happening in the federal space and a lot of things that are changing now, especially these days with what's been going on the last year. So I think some of the topics we're going to address today with the team on this call is going to be very pertinent. And again, I think we're going to bring a good perspective on things that are coming and some of the challenges that we have. So again, John, thanks for having me on, and thanks to our guests too for joining us.
Yes, that is incredible. Thank you so much. So with that said, we're going to basically discuss a couple different topics. Obviously, the theme of Enterprise Connect, Extreme Connect, is around the infinite enterprise. And what does that mean to us? We're living it right now, as everybody knows. This past year and a half, we have, basically a lot of people have been teleworking. A lot of people have had to change their work, formal work area. And this has created this enterprise, this infinite enterprise scenario that we're in. So 3 topics that we want to discuss around federal networks. One is mobility. Mobility is huge right now, obviously, with teleworking and the way that we're doing business, bringing IoT in with 5G and Wi-Fi 6. So we're going to have a couple questions around mobility. Then we're going to jump into cloud. And cloud obviously is taking over every enterprise. There's a lot of decisions at the federal level, the state level, and the private sector level that people are moving to cloud very, very quickly. And we're going to discuss that type of transition. And then data. The third is data. And as everybody knows, data is basically a type of currency right now, right? So we're going to jump into a couple of those discussion points as well. So first off, David, let me start with you. Teleworking, obviously, everybody's teleworking. We're here on a Zoom call right now. How do you see the federal agencies basically moving to a more of probably a 60% telework scenario? Just a couple months ago or a year ago, they were probably at a 4% telework scenario. And now it's maybe 50 to 60%. How do you see that transformation occurring, and how are they going to keep up with that need and that requirement?
Yeah, very good question, John. A lot of people, clients and even business partners ask, is teleworking here to stay, even after COVID abates? And, I see some return to traditional workspaces happening, but for the most part, teleworking is here to stay. And as bad as COVID has been and affected many people's lives negatively. Some silver lining is that it's been a forcing function to accelerate, what we offered to mobile warriors and mobile workers on a more permanent basis, right? Allowing them to work from anywhere, anytime, and still be productive. A lot of my customers at Tyto and back at AT&T would ask or would mention that they're more productive teleworking. They're able to eliminate some distractions in the workplace and collaborate. As long as they have the tools and the capabilities, they're able to collaborate with whomever. So I think infrastructure from a technology perspective, there's going to be more and more need for remote access services, sizing, voice platforms, a lot more voice traffic on the network these days than there has been in the past. A lot less emailing back and forth. You need to chat or make a call or spin up a video call. You need those tools. So a lot of infrastructure that will make kind of the mobile warrior into a permanent teleworker is needed to make sure that they're able to stay productive and stay connected.
I 100% agree. It's sort of interesting the amount of work you can get done when you're not sitting in traffic for an hour and a half. It extends your day. I think I'm more productive. Traditionally we're on the road, so I'm very used to the teleworking scenario, but I do think we are a lot more productive. Chris, I'm going to twist that a little bit to you. How is the security posture going to change when the government has to fulfill this demand of teleworking and remote working?
Yeah, I'm glad you zeroed in on that. I think that the biggest problem, or the biggest perhaps benefit that I see with all of this, is that we are taking something that's really been there all along and we're making it explicit. And by that, I'm kind of referring back to this with the idea of the infinite enterprise. The enterprise has always been infinite. There's only one internet that we connect to. But now the fact that we've dispersed a substantial portion of our workforce, both commercially and federally, out into the wild, we've made that explicit, right? We now know that people are going to be conducting business from untrusted networks. People are going to be, performing sensitive functions in their own home, which is not what any of the cybersecurity policies have been crafted around. And I think that the government, because it's a big, complex organization, and it tends to move slowly in some respects. And so, the cybersecurity policy and tools and so forth had often been a barrier to accomplishing, a more aggressive mobile workforce, posture. Now the cat's out of the bag. We have made substantial investments in infrastructure to support remote workers. Those will continue because I'm sure a lot of things were hastily done and need to be redone or enhanced as time goes on. And we're also going to we're going to need dynamic, policy-driven and machine-executed tools out there, because your workforce, just because I'm working remotely today doesn't mean I will be tomorrow, or my location today may be my home, and 2 days from now it may be a Starbucks or a temporary office space somewhere, or a contractor site or whatever. So being able to react to threats and to changes in network baseline activity, they're going to be harder. You're not going to have a normal day on your network anymore, because that's going to change and fluctuate, day to day based on individual preferences. So I think that being able to automate some of the security functions to be able to do micro or, in Extreme's case, hyper segmentation, and to do that on the fly and in response, direct response to stimuli, right, to a triggered change in your network performance baseline or your network behaviors that may be an indication of command and control activity or a test of security that a bad actor is performing. I think that that's a challenge that we're really just at the beginning stages of being able to address.
You've touched some really tough topics, and I know the federal government is grappling with everything that you just mentioned. Before I go to the next question, Greg, anything you want to add on that from an Extreme network standpoint?
Certainly. I'm glad you asked. I think what we got to key into is the elasticity and the dynamic aspects of the environment and the world we're in today, right? You're going to see, Extreme as well, right? The move to subscription models for things. How can we quickly scale up and even scale down in areas where we need to move that workforce, or we need to increase that bandwidth, or we need to add capacity? This move to subscription is kind of the derivative of what COVID caused. It's accelerating all that. To Chris's point earlier, we're seeing that now, and that's something that Extreme is bringing to market and have for a while now. But now it's even more accentuated, right? This move to subscription models. How can I scale up, scale down? How can I simplify acquisitions? Because this is happening at cloud speed. Acquisitions need to keep up. How do we make that and accelerate that in the government space? That's one of the bigger challenges. I talked to Chris offline earlier about this, and it is one of the key areas also that we're seeing big changes, or the government slowly trying to morph into this new world with not only being able to scale down in subscription environments, but how do I streamline acquisition processes as well? This is a challenge. And Extreme has come to the market recently with abilities to do that. Universal platforms, subscription models, not for just the hardware, but the cloud access as well. Single licenses for things, right? We're trying to make things simpler, more elastic, more flexible for the market. And that's kind of where we come in, John. So, to piggyback off Dave and Chris, these are perfect examples of things that Extreme are working to make easier for the federal government.
Easier the better.
Yes.
That is correct. David, I'm going to jump back to you. While we're talking about mobility, obviously we can't talk mobility without talking about the key trend in mobility, which is 5G and Wi-Fi 6. How do you see that technology accelerating and assisting the government when they do put their big toe into 5G, which is coming down the pike? Now, how do you see that accelerating network deployments and providing better service to their customers?
Right. Yeah. And before I get, answer your question directly, let me just give a little bit tutorial on 5G. There's several flavors of 5G. The ultimate goal of 5G is ultra low latency and high speeds over wireless or spectrum infrastructure-based infrastructure, and that can rival fiber connections, 1 gig or even up to 10 gig, at least in some field trials. As we get more and more deployment, those speeds may drop, but the technology is going to improve and offset that. So it's really becoming an alternative to traditional fiber-based infrastructures, not a replacement, but if you have a greenfield or a special application where it's cost prohibitive, you can start looking at 5G deployments, as an alternative. And DoD in particular is doing that. They've issued and awarded a number of trials or pilots. They call them, tranches, and they are extensively evaluating how 5G technology can improve their mission, how it can improve their operations, improve their readiness. Tyto is actually a sub to AT&T, an awardee on several OTAs that are focused. One focused with the a use case in the Navy at their warehouse in San Diego, and another couple with the Army in terms of doing 5G test beds. And they're trying to figure out how can these technologies, they know the technologies have promise, but how can they be applied to really help them? Because they know, those technologies in many ways are here today, and to be, to compete with their near peers in the global security space, they need to implement these technologies at the same speed or faster than their peers. So very interesting how they're taking a look at it, and trying to apply them to specific use cases as opposed to just implementing technology for the sake of technology's sake.
Well, David, we're going to have a sidebar conversation, figure out how Extreme can be on part of that team as well, but that'll be for later after the show. Chris, I'm going to take it obviously back to you around a security standpoint. And Dave, I'm going to ask you a little bit about IoT later as well. With IoT is driving a ton of connectivity into the infinite enterprise. How do we secure that? What do we have to do from a federal standpoint? I mean, it's coming. It's happening now. IoT is for real, and they're going to be having sensors. They're going to have artificial intelligence, machines. They're going to have everything connected to the network, and they already have started. How do you secure it?
Well, now you're kind of going back to that whole concept of zero trust networking, right? And what applies to an individual, out there that is moving around is going to apply to to other more sophisticated sensors. And then tying, I think things that 5G is really going to enable is the shift. Today we have IoT, but again, they're one-dimensional sensors, and they tend to be, like my friends would say, hey, it's just a toaster. You take it out there, you plug it in, it's got limited functionality, it does its thing, and you can move on. Yes, it can be co-opted as a bot for a distributed denial of service attack, but it's a fairly one-dimensional endpoint. With 5G, you're now going to have n-dimensional endpoints. I was reading the other day, IBM is moving into 2 nanometer sets, and which is going to improve the power consumption, and it's going to put a whole bunch more capability out at the edge that doesn't exist today. And even where we exist today is a quantum leap from what was capable 5 or 6 years ago. The idea that we not only have a sensor, but that sensor can now be will evolve with 5G to be able to take what'll become an infinite variety of actions out at the edge. Cybersecurity doesn't become just a cyber threat. Now you have the potential of real kinetic threats through cyber infrastructure. It goes back to, you've got to secure the device in and of itself. It has to be locked down. You have to have a hardened encrypted core. All the various principles around zero trust. You're able to issue and manage and revoke very complex certificates. And on top of all that, you've got to have the identity and access management infrastructure itself hardened, because the whole ICAM, right, identity credentialing and access management, that whole discipline is really going to be the one of the core drivers of that that zero trust ubiquitous infrastructure out there. So now, from a 5G standpoint, most of my customers and agencies are really just starting to explore, those options. Probably not quite as far along as the DoD space or the Intel space may be today, but you're starting to see that low-hanging fruit crop up with people and agencies looking at that as a legitimate augment to existing fiber connections for, say, DR purposes, right? If I get a fiber cut, it may make more sense from a route diversity point of view to have a 5G alternative rather than multiple fiber routes coming out of a particular facility. So, you're kind of seeing that those people dipping their toes in the water, like I prefer saying, with those types of use cases. They're not critical, but they will allow the agencies to, to flex the capabilities of 5G infrastructure.
Chris, you just hit it on the head, and it's that diverse routing and the disaster recovery. I think that's going to be a lot of the first use cases in the federal agency and infrastructure. Greg, I'll tee this up because this is what we do. We can tie that from a fabric standpoint, right? All the way from the data center to the campus to the edge. Give us a little bit of idea of what we're talking about with that.
Sure. David and Chris both hinted at the advantages and things that are coming our way with 5G infrastructure. One of the things that I think is going to be paramount, right, is policy control for that the access, the users that come on board, securing that data path all the way through from the 5G, wireless infrastructure into the core and across, the enterprise network, right? How do you do that? So hypersegmentation is going to be one way of securing those, what are typically referred to as IoT devices, right? But some of those are actual, endpoints where a government employee or a warrior may have a secure phone of some kind, right? So you're going to need to be able to secure that too, and hypersegmentation will allow that through the network, right? And then the policy that you apply to that, right on the edge, around what what Extreme calls the Fabric Connect environments. Again, that's going to be really a key aspect to being able to onboard 5G connectivity into the core of your network, and provide, again, a DR maybe capability, right? If the primary network is not there, what else can you do? Maybe we'll find that 5G is the backup, right? To Chris's point earlier. So we're going to see a lot of change happening, when 5G starts to become paramount across government networks, and certainly into the warrior space, right? For the frontline battle space, 5G is probably going to find its way there first, right? We're going to need to be able to communicate how our troops communicate. And how do you secure that? You apply policy, you apply security controls, you provide hypersegmentation, but you also provide a flexibility of being able to attach anywhere. How do you do that, right? There's fabric attached technologies that we provide into our core Fabric Connect core, right? That will allow that. And then again, you kind of roll that into an orchestration capability, right? Some of it's private cloud, public cloud, maybe even local, that we also have the flexibility to do. But I think securing that mobile connectivity and providing the flexibility for those devices to attach anywhere are going to be really key going forward in the federal space. Again, you're going to see this probably in a lot of government base infrastructure as maybe a backup to a lot of the wired connectivity, maybe in guest networks, you'll see a lot of that. But I think you're going to see this a lot happening in forward deployed bases and infrastructure, right? We're going to see the battle space evolve to being able to use 5G. Right, and connect anywhere. So again, security, that the mobile devices themselves, you can see some security, pushed down to those devices. How do you do that? Cloud infrastructure is going to provide that. Secure cloud infrastructure will provide that too. But then applying the policies and the security on top of that. Again, this is all areas where Extreme are excelling in today, especially with our XIQ technology and our on-prem XIQ site engine technology. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a game changer, John.
That is a great segue. Getting to the next topic. The next topic we're going to talk about is cloud delivery.
Right.
David, obviously everybody has a strategy to bring in cloud first from Fed, right? How do you see the agencies adopting cloud? Not just with mobility, but with different applications, different workloads, right? Some people are bringing in certain workloads to the cloud. Certain people are keeping some workloads on-prem. Some have air-gap networks. Some can go straight to the cloud. How do you see the federal agencies adopt cloud when it comes to mobility and network delivery?
Right. A lot of my customers are asking me, is it is it cloud or is it on-prem? Kind of a versus. And I say, well, it's not versus, it's and. There's going to be a need for on-prem applications or capability to extend into the cloud, and vice versa. You're going to need to get data that's in the cloud back to certain locations that need access to that data. But no, so you need both. So we look at it kind of like a hybrid cloud environment which extends the capability of the cloud, but also presents additional challenges in terms of management, in terms of security, in terms of policy and orchestration. So so the good news is that we have experience helping customers get access to the cloud, and so it can be done from their existing networks. But we also allow them, the ability to keep some workloads inside their four walls or within a secure environment, should the cloud not be able to satisfy those security needs, and have it work seamlessly, for their applications so that they don't notice the difference. So it is possible. It hasn't always been that way. The cloud, automation and self-service capabilities in the early days was pretty sparse. A lot of marketing versus capability, but now it's really maturing, and the capability is starting to catch up with the hype. And we really see it as being an enabler of enterprise services, enabler of mobility and teleworking, but it doesn't mean move every workload to the cloud. It means figure out your strategy, where it makes sense to move to the cloud, do that, but you're going to have to work in a hybrid environment.
Yes, that's right on point. Chris, I'm going to take it, as you know, to the security side of the house for you. With the FedRAMP requirements, obviously security is top of mind for cloud delivery. How are you seeing the federal agencies, play on that FedRAMP line versus what needs to be FedRAMP, what doesn't need to be FedRAMP, which workloads go to the cloud, how do you secure them? Give me a little bit of what your take is on that.
Well, I've actually been a bit surprised. The government's often known for being a little bit behind the curve, but in a lot of respects, the agencies have kind of jumped forward and not just embraced cloud, but really started embracing more software as a service capabilities. And it's partly a function of the maturity of those platforms. You have organizations out there like ServiceNow or a Salesforce that can deliver really, really robust functionality and a lot of customization into their base offering, so that it can be adapted to support the unique missions of the federal agencies. So you've kind of got this leap forward into SaaS environments, and that's as you referenced, that's kind of aided and abetted by those SaaS providers getting increasingly accumulating FedRAMP accreditations or authority to operate. And so, as it's taken a lot of time to get to this point, now that we are, what ends up happening, I think, is that the data is becoming the central, when it comes to the cloud, the data itself is becoming the central article of protection, right? So just as we were talking from say a network or a mobility or an IoT standpoint, we're talking about zero trust in terms of what is on the network or what assets we're managing. When it comes to cloud, I think you're becoming, you're starting to drift towards a more data-centric model. How do I protect data that is in, my SaaS application? If I'm extracting data from that to do on-prem workloads, how can I make sure that that enriched data does not go back out to my cloud environment, if my policy doesn't permit that? How can I get my controls to be granular around that sort of thing? Now that's existed in the DoD and Intel space for a while, in terms of gateways that can handle that level of multi-layer security. But we haven't really seen that on the, in the civilian world or in commercial agencies. And I think you're going to start seeing more of that. I think that capability like Extreme has, where you can actually run, I'll use my terminology, although I'm sure Greg will correct me, but you could run a VM on a what was formerly a network device. That may give me that capability to employ that secure gateway functionality at the data level in my network and embed that in the embed it and integrate it with the control plane that I use to manage my security policy. So there's some real interesting things there, and you're starting to see, I think, these capabilities converging. We're not there yet, but I could foresee a point pretty quickly where we can get to that level of sophistication.
No, yep, that is exactly correct. Speaking of Greg correcting you on this, which I know he won't, but Greg, tell us a little bit about how we are deploying CloudIQ Networks, and we're bringing that workload from the network management up into the cloud, and we're assisting our customers to deploy a little bit more agile in an agile fashion.
Sure, John. So I think this is when you start to use that word infinite, this is where that happens, right? The cloud itself, as David mentioned earlier, hybrid cloud solutions, local, on-prem, or public, right? You're seeing a lot of blends happening where you want to keep, and Chris mentioned this too, the security of your data is key. That's the lifeblood of your mission, right? So zero trust architectures are actually there for those reasons, to protect that data and protect access to that data. Right. So, and because we're creating this infinite environment, now we have infinite problems of trying to secure that infrastructure. Right. So, you talked a little bit about the security of that. ISO security standards are something that Extreme has really jumped into with all of our cloud environments and architecture. We have several ISO security standards that apply to our solution. Not just the cloud provider solution, our own solution's got ISO standards around it, security standards around it. So this is really important. But that it's become infinite, really. You take a look at what you're able to now do in that cloud, both in the public space and in the private or on-prem, provisioning of users, security of the infrastructure, access of that data, pulling analytical data, right? And Chris, you mentioned the VM that now we have that lives right in the network switch, integrated applications hosting, right? IAH technology, right? So you can actually put a virtual machine of a firewall instance right in the network device and actually start to look at traffic real time and pull that data out and analyze that real time and find anomalies or security breaches instantaneously, where before it took months. Day zero problem might happen where you got a security breach. You don't know it for months until you have an audit. Right now, with the ability that we have to put some of the security right in the network device or be able to access that data instantly from the cloud, you can actually start to see these things real time now, but before you couldn't, right? And the government's pushed to these models, these cloud models, and zero trust architectures are now providing this possibility, right? And Extreme, again, are on the forefront of that technology and that ability. And that is really key. That data is the most important thing for our mission, for our soldiers, for our government agencies right now. And what's happening with that? How do you secure that? That's the most important thing. So that's what makes things infinite. And now we have to figure out how to secure that infinite environment, right? And this is exactly what we're doing here at Extreme, providing all those, the ways to secure that with policy, with ISO security standards, right? Access to that data. We're right there at the forefront, John. So.
Yes, we are. And all three of you sort of gave me a great segue around data. Everyone just hit data a little bit, and we all know it's the new currency. David, I'm going to ask you, you've been doing this for a while, right? Just imagine if you had access to the data that we have now when you were deploying networks or deploying services to your customers 20, 25 years ago. How is that access to the data and artificial intelligence and machine learning, how is that going to help the federal agencies deploy networks and bring more services to that infinite enterprise?
Yeah, I'll answer how it should help. The reality is they're not quite there yet. But before I go there, I just want to pick up on something Chris and Greg mentioned. There is if you live long enough in this industry, you get to see trends, good and bad trends, either repeat themselves or get corrected. The good news is, from a security perspective, it used to be security was kind of an add-on or a bolt-on or an afterthought, right? And there was get the capability out there, move the bits through the pipe or through the connection, and we'll figure out how to secure it later. And then, of course, it's more costly and more expensive and not as robust. What's good now is companies like Extreme and other technology providers are building the security elements into the product from day one, right? Whether it's basic logging, whether it's interrogation, anomaly detection, traffic patterns, policy engines. Those are all great things that need to be taken advantage of in operations. The bad news is it's producing a tremendous amount of data, to your point. And how it should work is that data that's fed in from intrusion detection devices, firewalls, or other networking devices, sensors, needs to be fused, needs to be centralized, needs to be analyzed in an automatic way in order to make sense of it. And else it's just going to be a mound of data that nobody knows how to make information or sense of. And that's what customers are dealing with now, and particularly the federal government. They're dealing with all of this data, and they're asking us, well, how do I make it actionable? How do I get something out of this? How do I decide, where's the gold nugget in this pile of rocks that I have? And so things like, machine learning and AI are important technologies to apply to this mound of data. But it doesn't obviate the need to have good data practices. You need to tag data wherever possible. You need to reconcile data sources where data may not always agree with each other, or they conflict in certain ways, and you need to rationalize that. And so you need a good data management policy and management procedure and process in order to ingest the data from all the sources. And then, of course, you need to apply those technologies on top of that to get the intelligence out of that. So this is really table stakes for a lot of customers, is taking advantage of the wealth of data that they have and turning it into actionable intelligence for them.
No, you're exactly right. More data, more problems. But we can make more solutions out of that data as well. So, Chris, I'm going to come to you with the security question. With AI and ML and that data, how do we make sure that it's all secure, and how do we make sure that the enemy doesn't use it against us, in all fairness?
Yeah, well, that's certainly a concern, and that's actually kind of one of the core things that we're doing on the DHS's continuous diagnostics and mitigation program. You've got a situation where you're aggregating for cybersecurity purposes a lot of very good information, and it's very sensitive, about the state of your network, your assets, your individuals and identities, and the roles that they play in the organization. And you're consolidating all of that in one place. Obviously good, general good cyber hygiene is required in those instances, but you can't wall off that information. I think that would have been, we turn the clock back 10 years, and that would have been the default response is, hey, this is the crown jewels of our network environment here, and we're gonna put it in a vault and throw away the key. But you've got agencies that like Department of Education is really interested in taking all of that information that they're collecting from a security standpoint and using it to enhance operational processes and procedures. I mean, my favorite aspect of that is preventive maintenance, right? Instead of having to touch a device, physical device on a periodic basis every 30 days or every 6 months or whatever that is, just as a matter of course, I can now, utilize that information to have the network predict for me when human intervention is required. And that typically involves a lot less labor because you're not doing things that you don't need to do. You're only doing them when you need to do them. The example is like changing your oil. We went from every 3,000 miles, regardless of, make or model, to now our cars tell us when they need their oil changed. And so that's just one example of, an awful lot of really good operational use cases that can be gleaned from this information. So, you've got to be careful. You've got to, as I said before, you've got to be able to tag data with certain security attributes so that, you're not misusing it, or you're not aggregating disparate pieces of information in such a way that you create a highly sensitive data through that process of aggregation and correlation. But I don't know that there are a ton of AI functions that do this natively today, but I think that that's something that can be that the market really needs, is that capability, and being able to put, just like we talk about secure software development processes and techniques. I think we're going to have to get to secure, AI techniques. And heck, there's a recent story about a gaming platform where you can, there's a fantasy game, the name escapes me at the moment, but you can type in commands and AI will take your commands and elaborate this fantasy world in response to your inputs. So it kind of builds the world to your specifications. Well, just as everything else, there's a really dark side to that. And now people are concerned that the AI is actually building worlds that are very troubling from a moral standpoint, in response to what people enter into the platform. And I think that's certainly a dark side of AI, right? Those routines and that machine learning capability have the capacity to generate sensitive information out of previously not sensitive, previously common information. And so that will have to, that's something that I see as being a need in the future, is the ability to bake that capability into the artificial intelligence platforms and routines that are being used.
That is 100% true. As we all know, the DoD is preparing and training with virtual, AI, virtual reality games as we speak today. Hey, Greg, in regards to how we utilize data from a network and a service standpoint, give us a little bit of background of how we could help federal agencies with their network data to provide them decision-making capabilities, and they can basically bring on different services and take services down as needed.
So yeah, this is a great segue into some of what we're able to do with automation. I say that's like the first step in the path to machine learning and AI is automation. That's kind of the step that most of the government's at right now. What can we automate, right? And then once we automate, then we create a data set that we can then apply some controls to for, with machine learning, then take some action on that data, and that kind of implements the whole artificial intelligence model, right? So one of the things that Extreme's able to do, both with our on-prem solutions and in a cloud solution. Imagine, Chris and Dave, with the customer base that we all know, right? One of the biggest issues that are out there today is the manual processes that have to happen when you have a failed card, or you got a switch go down, or a bad fan, right, or something like that. It's manual intervention from the NOC to the help desk folks to some field engineers got to roll out there, right? And it's someone who's probably got to pull the card, ship it, send it back, start an RMA, follow that whole path, right? Imagine if we can take that and automate that process. These are some of the things that we are able to do today with some of the cloud implementations and even on-prem implementations that we have. We can actually spot a problem in the network where most CME technologies are going on, continuous monitoring and watching these networks with some of the tool sets that we have. We can spot a bad fan, and from that bad fan, with the connectivity that you may have on-prem, notify the NOC bad fan, automate a ticket, and that ticket will generate a call out or an email, or even open a ticket with the manufacturer to say, hey, we got a bad fan here, we got a bad card or a bad SFP. Open it, automate that ticket process, open that ticket, and an RMA is automatically sent out to that site, right? So half that process is already completed without a NOC engineer having to even get involved. Right, so these are some of the things that we're able to automate and create some AI functionality into in the services and support models that really the cloud models have really fast forwarded us to, right? Especially in the last year or two, that these things and these technologies, being able to automate some of those processes have really taken off or been at the forefront of the COTARs that are out there today, and the field field engineers and the customer services people. How do I get faster service faster back on in production? How do I get that to happen without that manual intervention? Because as we, David and Chris, and as we have all been talking about, the cloud and the teleworking and the mobility that we are now expecting, the speed of service that we're expecting in the government environment, we need to be back online quickly. We can't afford any downtime. Things are happening. Our missions are ongoing. That time it takes to turn around an RMA or to fix or swap out a blade, the human steps involved are slowing down the process, right? The reason that we're headed towards automation and AI and ML is to get the human out of the picture, because that's what's slowing things down. Change management processes typically are in place because the human error happens from time to time. So with cloud deployments and cloud models, both what we can do on-prem and in the cloud with XIQ technology, we're able to automate a lot of that whole service and support model, kick off those tickets automatically, and in some cases have a extreme delivery show up, maybe hand delivered to the customer in some instances, right? Depending on the site. So these are some of the things, John, that I think is happening now with automation today, with extreme solution sets and helping that service and support model for our government customers. So that's one aspect of it, John, I think is probably the key, that we are able to help the federal government resolve.
Yeah, I know we see a lot of zero touch delivery requirements with our customers these days.
Correct.
Everybody on this call has seen. And
John, if I can just piggyback on that for a second.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, and I think Greg's right on in terms of the promise. I think independent of cloud and emerging technologies, the automation can be done today. You can get started on those initiatives right now. I think the promise of AI can be, and in some micro instances is, leading to that nirvana of self-healing, networking and self-healing cloud resources, right? Where the AI predicts service interruptions before they occur, before there's a failure, and they take action, where needed to load balance, to redirect, to reroute. There's all these individual fast reroute and other capabilities that are available in the network, but you need kind of that centralized processing to make sense of that in a timely fashion, in a real-time fashion. And there's been a lot of technology promise over the years, but AI has that real potential to do that. Born in the gaming industry and now on everybody's phone with Siri or other personal attendants, it's now ubiquitous and can be available. So really harnessing that for its promise is kind of the next big thing.
Funny you say that. You sound basically like a commercial for our Fabric Connect technology. That's capability that we were bringing to our customers. So, hey, folks, we could sit here and have this conversation probably for 2 more hours, but I do think that we're running just a little bit out of time. And I want to sincerely thank David and Chris and Greg for joining us, and all of our customers that are going to join the webcast and listen to this session. I know it was very, very informative, and we look forward to speaking to everybody that is interested in our mobility, our cloud, and our data portfolio here at Extreme Federal. So, David, any last words before we drop?
No, I'm good. Thank you for the opportunity again. It was I really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Chris.
Yeah, one thing that I'd add, and it's great because it's an analogy we can all relate to in some fashion, is the scaling of what we're trying to do. We've talked about not just scaling in terms of expanding our infrastructure, adding in mobility, adding in AI, and improving the sophistication of our IoT environments, but on top of all that, we're now layering in, more granular security controls and faster response and reaction times. All of these things add up so that physically we might only be scaling our environment 2 or 3x over what it has been historically, but we're now ladling in a whole bunch more complexity that makes it an order of magnitude more complicated to manage. I know that scaling is one of your value propositions and something historically, Extreme has done very, very well. And I think that I can't underscore how important that is. And the reference point for that is the quest to create a 300 mile per hour street legal vehicle, right? And I think Bugatti's done it. You might have McLaren that's either done it or very close to it. But it's interesting to understand that going from, say, 150 miles an hour, which is maybe what a Corvette or a Porsche 911 can do, to go to 300, it only looks like it's, our minds perceive that as just a 2x scale factor, when in reality, it's more like at least an 8 to 10 to 12x factor, because, the shearing forces that the tires are subject to go up by an order of magnitude between 150 and 300 miles an hour. The brakes that you need to be, need to disperse heat, logarithmically more quickly. And the engine needs to be, much, much more powerful than one would expect, just on looking at a linear scale. And so I think that those are important things to bear in mind as we, as the network environment becomes more sophisticated. I think the ability to scale and to scale seamlessly across all these different dimensions is going to be a critical differentiating factor in your industry.
Well, I've never heard anybody describe our networks like a Bugatti, but I'll take it. And it actually is really true. Greg, any final thoughts from your side?
I think Dave and Chris summed up very well, John. Again, I want to thank David and Chris. Thanks to Tyto, thanks to ManTech for giving us some of your time today. John, these topics are on the forefront of every government agency right now. We're really, the infinite enterprise, it brings, to Chris's point, potentially infinite amount of challenges. And how do you scale that? And how do you scale that with less risk security-wise, and less risk to your workforce with the workload, right? So these are things that we keep in mind at Extreme, to be able to simplify things, to provide that elasticity, to be able to provide some of that automation things built into what we do, right? And at every point across the network, right? So, from the data center to the core ag infrastructure, to your building, to your closet, to the IoT devices and the APs that are in place that are doing all kinds of connectivity to all the other sensors and wireless devices that need to connect, right? And being able to Chris's point, all the challenges you have in between, so we're here to help the government agencies with all of that, and our partners as well, right? So I think, John, again, thanks to our partners for joining us, and thank you for emceeing today. I think it's been a great session.
All righty, David, again, thank you so much for joining. Chris, you're always welcome. Greg, thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.